Hi, I'm Stuart Wood from Wayward Music, and I just want to do a very brief introduction to this lovely instrument, the cajon. These were originally tea chests that were used on the tea plantations of Peru, and since that time they've been developed into quite specialised instruments. What are they? Well, essentially they are what they say. They're a box. They have a top, a bottom, they have sides. The most important face on the cajon that you'll come across is the front face, which is called the tapper, and the tapper is made from a much thinner material. That thinner material allows it to resonate more, so that when you hit it you get a much bigger sound. So if I play the front face here, you get a nice bass sound and you get a nice snare sound. Okay, now the original tea boxes, they produced a rattle because the wood had split from weathering. What they do these days is, rather than using split wood at the front, they actually have inside the drum, which unfortunately you probably can't see, but to look through this hole, if you look inside this cajon, pressed up against this front head are wires. These are called snares, as they would be on a snare drum on a drum kit. In some cases those snares are fanned like a brush, like a traditional drummer's brush, which just pushes against the front face and they produce a buzz. In other cases they're strings, like guitar strings, that run from top to bottom of the instrument. Both are the same. When you hit the wood it makes the wires vibrate and that gives a nice vibrating sound. The sides, the top and the bottom, are made from much thicker material, typically 9 to 12 millimeters thick. The back, very often thinner, maybe only 3 millimeters, perhaps 6 millimeters thick. The back usually has a hole in it, and that hole is simply to let the air escape and the sound escape when you play the instrument. On the bass, in this case they're felt feet, but on many cajons they have rubber feet. This just isolates the drum from the floor, and what that means is that when you play the instrument, the wood is able to vibrate, to resonate and to produce a nice full sound. Okay, now I quite often get asked by people, can you provide me with a nice red cajon? Well, to be honest, in many cases you can get almost any colour cajon you want, but that's not really important. What defines a good cajon is the materials that it's made from and essentially the sound that it produces. So if you're looking for a good cajon, a good starting point, a good sound source, some materials that you would want to include would be things like beech or birch. Birch and beech are both very hard woods. Birch is used a lot in traditional drum manufacture. Because of its hardness, you get a nice high tone, you get a nice bass tone, and there are very few middle tones in the way to muddy or interfere with the sound. So it means that when you play a nice bass note, when you play a nice top note, it sounds very similar to a snare drum and a bass drum on a drum kit. There's a lot of separation between the two. So birch and beech are good for that. Some other woods, which may simply be cheap versions, poor low density plywood, or they may be things like rubber wood, which I've always found is a little bit softer and tends to give a lot of tones in that middle region, mean that when you actually come to play the cajon, the bass notes and the top notes just don't sound that defined, and that means no matter whether you're playing with it acoustically or whether you're miking it up, it just doesn't seem to cut through the rest of the instruments. So your best starting place is a wooden cajon. The front, say typically 3 millimeters, much thinner. Sides a lot thicker, made of beech or birch. Cajons come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, and choosing one can be really daunting. So I have actually done another video on how to choose the best cajon for you. But what I'd like to show you is another cajon, just at the moment, which will give you an idea of differences. So I've just talked about a cajon made from all wood. This particular one is made from wood too. It's an oak outer. It's a much thicker, a much heavier drum. But in this case, what they've used on the front is, instead of wood, they've used carbon fibre. This is a much thinner head. It allows the drum to react a lot more quickly to gentler strokes, and it produces different sounds. That just happens to be a choice that's personal. I like this drum. I think it's a lovely drum and it sounds good. But I use also drums that are made from wood. These are the mainstay of the cajon stable and sound great if you manage to get the right drum. One thing that's worth mentioning, you can see it on this one. I've got what look like, you can see them, 4 cooker knobs on the back. All these are attached through the drum to the snare wires on the front, and that allows me to tighten the wires or to loosen them slightly to produce a different sound depending on what I want. That's a bit of a luxury. If you get a cajon that sounds good, that feels good and that plays well and that you're happy with, these sorts of things are just little extras that you can choose to include if you so wish. So hopefully that's given you a brief introduction to the cajon, what it is, a little bit about its construction, and what I want to do now is to move on to how you can choose the best cajon for your needs.